Alright guys, I'm here at the American Helicopter Museum, which is at the Brandywine Airport here in West Goshen, Pennsylvania, close to Philadelphia. And I'm fortunate enough to live about literally like 3 or 4 minutes from the location here of a famous helicopter. Famous because it's the only HH-2 Delta left on exhibit here on loan from the National Museum of Naval Aviation down in Pensacola. She's in a little bit of need of some TLC. You can see there's the old bureau number there, 149031. AKA Tango Delta 14, copyright 14, or Shaka 14, depending on whom you speak to. You can see the famous Snidely on there with the Bad Boys of Bravo logo on there. Our T58 -JE-8F engines, which uses MIL L23699. It's amazing that I remember all of this minutia. And a couple of the airliners I flew, I can barely remember what the engines were on those airplanes. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with this fairing here. I'm a little disappointed that they've not taken better care of her, and the Navy doesn't really seem to pay as much attention as the Air Force does to making sure that the aircraft are properly displayed and maintained, which is most unfortunate. Kind of an unusual, or not an unusual, but an old anecdote here. I went on a deployment with this aircraft back in the fall of 1989, and we did our jumps out of this with myself and Master Chief Don Gunter, who may have been the only active deployed rescue swimmer, Master Chief, that I knew while I was serving in the Navy. And great guy. He was our maintenance chief, as well as one of the air crewmen and a rescue swimmer. And myself and him and Eleftherios Moustakakis, aka Lefty, who was an AD2, I was an AW2. We actually jumped out of each side of the aircraft simultaneously, which was kind of neat, because this door, unlike the F model, would open. As you can see, the handle there. Can't really see too much in the cockpit there, but there's the old PT-429 plotting board, which used the AYK2 computer and the Doppler radar to compute its position once you gave it a some type of a reference, be it a geo reference or a TACAN or something like that. The HH-2 Delta also had a loud hailer on there. I don't ever remember us using it. I don't think it was operative. I actually showed our pilots how to use the PT-429 when I was on this jet. You can see the gravity fueling ports, the old pressure fueling receptacle or NATO receptacle with the pre-check switches, and the hatch or the door for hooking up the hydraulic Jenny, your speed decreaser, reservoir, sight gauge. The oil coolers are back here in this compartment. You see the steps. They used to have steps on both sides of the aircraft when they were A and B models. Then they just went to the one on the steps on the right. There's the older style drop tanks. The newer ones were the 100-gallon drop tanks with a Mark 8 bomb shackle. There's your static port. You can see the little plugs for the blade crutches. And also unique to the Delta, unlike the Foxtrot, the tail wheel was located all the way in the back. So this was like a real tail dragger as far as the pilot's taxiing it. You got your radar, dual radar altimeter antennas. You can kind of barely see the Doppler antenna, grounding attachment, and that's kind of it. You can see the tail rotor back there. That's the newer tail rotor that had the extra grease fittings on it that you only had to grease every 12 hours instead of every 6. And then near and dear to all of us old rescue swimmers is the double rescue hook. I forget all the limitations on all that, sad to say. But you got the ring on there. We used to hang a little strap there for our chem lights, and then you had the equipment hook and then the big hook where either your V-ring or an aviator would hook up his gated D-ring to that if he wasn't being fished out by a rescue swimmer. They had rear view mirrors on these things. And then you had the nose doors which open up that had your battery, your blade track box, your AFCS computer, and then this is the ASN 50, the compass, I think, if I remember. You guys will have to remind me of that. Then you got your IFF antennas, and then you got some fixed lights, and then there was also a light that the pilots could use on the collective that they could train and elevate as a when they're hovering over an area. And then there's the retractable landing gear with the Dowdy liquid spring and the rather light duty brakes that this thing had in it, but landing on board ship we always landed with a parking brake set. So you can see this airplane's got a mixed bag of some gray parts as well as the original white parts. You can see there's this side actually has the intake. That bullet nose is the starter for the airplane. I'm sorry, the helicopter. The exhaust. You can still see this thing's leaking oil, so I guess that's a good thing. If it's leaking oil, it's still got oil in the reservoir, which we serviced up here forward on the, opened up this turtle back here, and that had your hydraulic reservoir and also your main gearbox reservoir, which we serviced with a Pond 6 as it was called. Always fun to lug that thing up on the aircraft. You can also see the unique thing to all command helicopters, which is the blade flaps, the servo flaps, which was really a good system because with the little electric motors with the blade track system, it sensed the different voltages of the blade track, and it would make little adjustments automatically, and you get a nice smooth track. It was actually a very smooth flying helicopter, even smoother than the H-60, which I also was a crew member in. Didn't have the same amount of affection for the H-60 as I did for the H-2, maybe because the H-2 was my first helicopter, first aircraft as an air crewman, all that good stuff. And I was fortunate enough to get some time here in the HH-2 Delta and do some SAR jumps out of it and do some fun flying in the Philippines, landing in some confined areas and having dogs, flying so low that dogs were literally chasing us down the beach. I don't know if maybe I should be revealing that, but we were definitely flying that low. But we had an authorization to do that from our type commander due to the type of operations that the helicopter was used for off an oceanographic survey ship. So we had permission from our type commander to conduct low-level flying in the Philippines, as well as just about land anywhere we really wanted to. And we did. Sometimes we just see a spot and, hey, let's do some landings out there. So that was a lot of fun. Some of the other helicopters here, they got an old HH-3D that belonged to HC-9, the Black Cats in North Island there. This is it was a Naval Reserve squadron that did combat rescue. Unfortunately, it's a little bit worse for wear as well. They also have a Coast Guard HH-52, which was, this particular one operated off one of the icebreakers. That's why it's painted all orange. And then you've got this Boeing 360, which was a high-speed prototype. They've got some other helicopters inside, and they have active restoration projects going. And my understanding is that this helicopter, the H2 here, is supposed to be restored also. So I'm hoping to pitch in and help those guys with that effort. I can certainly do what I'm directed to do. I'm not a maintenance guy per se, although I did turn a few wrenches here and there and some other tasks when I was out on a deployment. Just by a function of a small detachment, everybody kind of had to pitch in to help with the maintenance effort with the helicopter. You may be able to see there the yellow on the bottom. That's the droop stops, because this helicopter uses a fully articulated rotor system, which means it leads, lags, flaps, and then of course the blades also change pitch. So there's some things like shock absorbers or dampeners up there, and some counterweights, and you can see the rods, shoestring rods as we call them, that went out to the servo flaps, and then those further went down into the aircraft to a device called an azimuth, and then I think it was called an idler, and then down to what some guys referred to, the old timers, the Cadillac unit, which was behind the co-pilot's seat in front of the, well, on the F model, in front of the sensor operator, and that was your hydraulics for the flight controls. And you literally, I got to fly it a few times, you literally could fly this thing with you know, your thumb and your finger, you know, using a little bit of the beep trim and just very small movements with the stick. In fact, I was doing so good that the pilot that I was flying with turned everything off, and then of course it was much more difficult and really heightened the respect I had for our pilots, because one of our pilots, we had to make a boost off landing on the ship, which was pretty challenging and almost could be really difficult if you had a sea state of any kind. So anyhow, if you get in the area here near Philadelphia, it would really be a great visit to see the aircraft that they have on display. They also have a prototype of the Osprey out front, and this area of the country is pretty famous for rotary wing aircraft. You know, Pisecki and Boeing Vertol. In fact, Boeing Vertol is still in Ridley Park. They produce the CH-47. They also produce the fuselages for the Osprey. And Augusta USA, I'm not sure exactly if that's the full name of the company, but up in Northeast Philadelphia, they got a contract to build the Huey replacement for the Air Force. And then over in Coatesville, PA, Sikorsky, which is owned by Lockheed Martin now apparently, is where they're building the V8, the presidential helicopter, among other types based upon the Sikorsky S-92, I believe. I've gone over there a couple times and I've seen that prototype for that, as well as the Thai Navy prototype that's got all the radar and all that good stuff on it. Looks like a pretty cool machine. So anyhow, hopefully you guys enjoy this, and if you have any questions, be sure to let me know and I'll see what I can find out for you.